We have with us the Senior Vice President of ASSOCHAM and the CMD of Spicejet, Mr. Ajay Singh, joining us here on CNN News 18. So thank you so much for taking our time and joining us here. Your first reaction to the budget?
I think it's a very solid, stable, progressive budget, very responsible budget, and also a growth-oriented budget. I think it's fitting that in a year in which India takes the presidency of the G20, it's showing to the world how an economy should be run. If you look at it, the situation today is that inflation is down in India. Fiscal deficit is under control. Growth is improving, and with this budget I would think that it would grow even higher than the 6.5% that is projected. Infrastructure spending is up from 7.5 lakh crores to 10 lakh crores. So in every which way, we are showing to the world that despite COVID, India can run in a responsible way its government and its economy, and can be an example to the rest of the world and remain the bright spot of the global economy that we seek to be.
Right. Speaking specifically as far as aviation is concerned, 50 new airports for regional connectivity. How do you see, is that the much needed fillip and the boost that the industry needed at this point?
I think it's a part of a process. The UDAN scheme, the regional connectivity scheme, is one of the most successful schemes of this government, and it has led to unprecedented connectivity in small towns in India. And I think what they are doing is to add to that, not only with the airports but also heliports and water ports, and the ability of the government to innovate and find new ways of connecting its people, I think, is admirable, and we will in every way support these actions of the government by ensuring that there are flights to the airports that they seek to build. I think there is also discussion about creating 50 fully equipped tourist destinations, which will include infrastructure, other forms of tourist infrastructure, in addition to the airports and heliports, etc. And I think that's a positive step.
Right. As far as what the industry wanted, now from an industry perspective, of course, manufacturing is one aspect where they keenly watch what the finance minister is going to say. From an aviation perspective, are you satisfied with the announcements that have been made?
There is no particular announcement for aviation, but the budget is not the only place where announcements happen. If you recall, the government had announced a package for aviation during COVID, and recently announced the extension of a credit guarantee scheme for airlines. So it's part of a process, and if something is required, we will certainly go back to them. I think a lot of what the aviation industry requires has to do with the GST Council, and that's something which is not part of the central budget. So for that we will continue to request that aviation turbine fuel should be included in under the GST regime, and we will lobby for that.
Right. So because you're also associated with ASSOCHAM, that also looks at what's happening with consumer spending and demand and growth, so on and so forth. For the common man, of course, there's been a big relief in terms of tax rebate that has come up to 7 lakhs, rationalization of tax slabs. How do you see that spurring growth? Because then you'll have more money in your hands, you'll have more spending as well.
No, certainly. I think it's good news for taxpayers, and they will certainly have more money in their hands, and that should aid growth, because the money that you have will be spent, and that should lead to some consumption-led growth for sure. The other thing that ASSOCHAM does is to represent very strongly the MSMEs of the country, and I think for the MSMEs as well, several positive steps have been taken in this budget.
Right.
I think one of them is the provision of 2 lakh crores of credit guarantee, which will enable MSMEs to borrow under a government guarantee without collateral 2 lakh crores from their banks. I think the second positive step is that, as the FM said, payments which are made to MSMEs will be accounted for only once the cash is actually transacted, and that's positive because that improves cash flow for the MSMEs. Also, a refund of 95% of monies that were deposited for tenders which never materialized, I think is a big positive for the MSMEs. And of course, the larger issue of ease of doing business, etc. All those are big positives for the MSMEs.
Right. So lastly, from an industry perspective, again, yes, there are many wish lists, but what else would you wanted to hear as far as the industry is concerned?
I think what we really wanted was a consistency of policy making, which this budget has shown, and I think this budget will go a very long way in showing to the world that India is a responsible and growing global power that everybody needs to take note of.
Okay, perfect. So thank you so much for taking our time and joining us here on CNN News 18. Pleasure speaking to you.